Good morning and welcome to Brandenburg News Network. I am Donna Brandenburg, and it is the 4th day of June 2024, and welcome to our show today. I decided to do a continuation on what we had going on yesterday, and I thought it was a real interesting show. John Tater had to bow out today, so here we are today. And wanted to bring on Bob Terry again. I think this is really interesting. And quite honestly, the most important thing we can do right now is to write our elections. And if there's somebody that's nefariously involved in it, such as, say, Microsoft, and the vulnerabilities, I'm going to call it that, but I don't think it's vulnerabilities. I think it's a planned attack on the United States of America. And we all know that, Soros, Gates, and the big three there, that they're involved in all of this. So when we look at how much subversion there's gone in the United States, it's time for us to put a lot of attention on this, as it were. So I'm going to bring in Bob Terry here, and we're going to go through some stuff that I think is going to be really important, and say a prayer that we have a good connection here, because they keep trying to silence all of us, and not okay. But regardless, we're going to keep going. So how you doing this morning, Bob?
Great. Thanks again for having me. I really enjoyed yesterday.
It was a fun discussion, and I really wanted to give you time to talk about as much as we can. And I find that there's a lot of value in going through the long version of everything instead of headlines. I hate headlines. They're manipulative. So let's talk about, give everybody a little bit of your background and let you introduce yourself today and what you think is important. And then we'll go into the information that you have uncovered.
All righty. Well, again, thanks for having me. I started life. My father was a 17-year-old in World War II, and he fought with the Marines in Okinawa. I always grew up wanting to go in the Marine Corps. I had a scholarship called Platoon Leaders Class, and I went in the Corps at 21 years old. My first duty station right out of the chute was Beirut, Lebanon in 1983. And that peacekeeping mission evolved into combat. And I am one of the survivors of the barracks bombing. I was actually in ground zero, where everybody was vaporized, and 15 minutes before the truck bomb came through, I felt funny and moved. I've had to live with this my entire life. And so what happened with me was the Marine Corps sent me back to graduate school, and I left and became an engineer, what's now Lockheed Martin. I saw my first PC, IBM PC, in 1984, and I became hooked. Just, really positive way to channel energy. And so, make a long story short, I'm now ended up where I have 7 patents as a sole inventor in cyber. And the key operative word is sole inventor. I have an 8th pending. I was brought in by the warfighters Pentagon in 1999 because they knew of my technical background and success I've had in the defense industry. They wanted me to design a completely new software, completely new capability. The warfighters, the people in uniform, those admirals and generals were people that came up under Reagan, and they were still very serious. They wanted a new technology where they could get in front of viruses and not have to continually update with inoculants after the fact. So I went into my R&D mode, and I came up with a technology that mimicked the characteristics of a human immune system, white blood cell, and it was deployed, and it actually worked. It actually secured a Windows 95 computer and a Windows 98 and an XP, Windows 2000 server, 2003. Long and short of it is that right before 9/11 and after, they found out about this thing, and President W. Bush signed an executive order giving certain agencies the authority to go out and find any technology they want to use without having to go through the NSA. Boy, that was a stink. And they deployed my technology and it worked perfectly. As a matter of fact, there were things written, it made its way to Federal Computer Week magazine, and it was a feature cover article. The last 3 paragraphs actually say, and you have that in my biography, that it worked so well that it caused a debate between government officials if they wanted a security solution available that actually secures Windows. It actually says that. And it shut down the offensive operations. Well, I was given the authority to design a real, true security system at a time when they were searching for weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, and security was overall really the prime directive. And it just really, really, really worked well. And it was used the entire 8 years under the W. Bush administration. It was used from the beginning to the end of the Weapons of Mass Destruction Commission. You have everything that verifies I wrote 100% of the code. Nobody believed it could be done. Just really a great time for research. And the bottom line to it is that after the W. Bush administration and WMD commission was over, President W. Bush signed back an executive order to give all authority back to the NSA, and the NSA had the government deinstall it. No kidding. No kidding. Now, I'm very fortunate in my career. When I say I'm very fortunate, pretty much everything I've touched somehow made its way into the news media. And please understand, I wasn't looking to get it into the news media, but I've had the fortune. I've been featured in computer world, network world, PC world. I worked side by side with the former senior security program manager of Microsoft Worldwide. I was on syndicated show Pulse on America. They were interconnected with CNN Headline News, and also the Discovery Channel Learning. So you've got all that supporting information. But the most terrible part of what's happened to our country is that what I was praised in doing to be able to create and come up with solutions to solve problems, there has been this dark cloud. Anybody that really attempts to create something new, you're attacked. You're attacked. They want you to use open source. Nobody owns open source. You essentially work for free. All of these highly educated people that they've never been in a research environment. They never truly have in our most of our colleges. Now, this is terrible. There's only about 2 left that don't use open source technology. But these kids, when they come into their programming classes, they give them programs to work from. They don't start from scratch. There's no creativity. They're not teaching how to design anymore. It's this may sound like an alarmist or just somebody kind of angry because of the way it was done and now things change. But it's not because I've gone all the way up to the National Security Council and listen to this logic. Now this is some logic that's just disturbing. I let them know that I designed completely new technology. There's been articles in the last year where people realize having the source code released causes major problems. It's a bad situation having the source code out there and letting them know that I have working technology, that the code is not in the hands of anyone else. My company, I'm an American citizen, combat veteran owned business, certified in SAM.gov. And they look at someone that's come up with completely new research as quote unquote a high risk. Well, the risk is too high. You're not sharing your code, you're not working with other countries, and in this thought process, this thinking, there are actual articles out there to where these people have gone with international articles about, oh my gosh, if there's a problem with China, that's going to ruin innovation. This country is waiting on innovation in software to come out of China, okay, and to come from overseas. Um, it's and if you talk to any of these people about truly coming up with something new, it's just a culture. And the saddest part, here's the saddest part. The saddest part is going into a cyber lab and understanding a problem and designing something totally new is truly one of the most intense and also coolest things you can do in the world, because the satisfaction is unbelievable. I mean, you create something from nothing and it solves a problem. And I
I
mean,
can,
it's just,
I can tell you right now that we own a little tech company, and the caliber of programmers that are out there and tech people is actually very sad. You really don't have. There's not a lot of high level programmers out there anymore that can do exactly what you're talking about doing, and it is a little sad.
and on top of it, I mean, what I do, honestly, yeah, very intense, very, very creative environment. Uh, you know, I've designed proprietary source code, my entire career. And, inside of Microsoft, which the specs are terrible, it's always a fight. But even when you figure out the parameters and the specs, etc., if you don't like their function, you can create what's called an overloaded function, and you overwrite and replace what they have. Their compilers and linkers are pretty good in that respect, especially in the lower languages of C and C++. But you can create new functions, create things that their operating system utilities aren't doing. And it's just a real cool thing to do, and self-satisfaction. And when you mention that today, there are people in the government that get violent. They get very violent. And I don't know. It's just something that, yeah, I guess open source started about 2002, 2003. And the other sad part about this is this: you hear uh, all of this conversation about artificial intelligence. Now, if you take note of a timeline in artificial intelligence, I mean, I've been using books published by Dr. Rao, who's one of the foremost authorities in neural networking and fuzzy logic since 1995. And he provides examples. And, I've designed my own AI in some embedded devices that I've designed, and it's limited AI. But the truth is, artificial intelligence, if you've noticed and go back and look, is kind of like just hit the scene. Have you noticed that? I mean,
Mhm.
suddenly everything's talking about artificial intelligence. Well, no doubt some of it's pretty cool, but what's happening is it was posted on GitHub and everybody's downloading it. And, who has it the most? of what we're doing over here, that these people are trying to integrate everything into their daily lives? Well, China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran, etc., they have the same darn code. Now,
it's all moderated too. It's all of it's moderated. That's what I see happening, and that the answers are definitely skewed depending on the subject you're talking about.
yes, and when it comes to in our country, we have Microsoft, that's a proprietary system, and they made their money on their software. The hardware is pretty much a commodities market with hundreds of thousands of vendors, pick and choose your hardware. Then we have another proprietary software, Apple, but that is a completely closed system. Everything comes from Apple. I mean, and even though you hear about programmers in Apple, they're really simple applets. I mean, you cannot design a system process that's monitoring what's happening inside of Apple. That's actually illegal. The lawyers will be on you in a heartbeat. So we're left with, Microsoft, and, you can design technology to intercept, what's happening under the hood, if you really apply yourself, and it's very difficult, but, in life, those things that are worth having are not, they're hard. And, the oldest analogy in the book, which is so sad about our country, is, it's not hard to sell something that's free. And I don't know. I mean, I understand people in business and they have to compete. I get all that. But, now since a real shooting war started 7 October, and, all of the players connected to the different sides, the cyber war has taken off. And here's the worst news. If you go back and look at the penetrations that have occurred since the 7th of October, almost immediately after 7 October, in the very beginning of November, our most prestigious cyber research labs and most advanced networks with our most advanced security architectures, include zero trust. You look at Idaho labs, which they do a lot of cyber infrastructure research on how to protect America. Idaho National Labs, the hackers penetrated, downloaded all their data, and the lab did not know that they were hacked until the hackers published their data on the dark net. Now, a lot of folks listening, moving fast, probably shook their heads, but what the real truth is, these hackers penetrated these networks and never triggered any aspect of the security defense system. Nothing. People, aren't slowing down fast enough. And then right after that, GE, their networks were penetrated, that they were connected to DARPA. They did not know their labs were penetrated until their data was published on the dark net. And what's been happening is, these networks are all being breached, and it's triggering nothing.
Because they don't want to fix this, because the people that are sitting in the seats, they're part of the problem. They're complicit.
Well, you know what? When you say they don't want to fix it, that can be taken many different ways. But the bottom line to it is that there's just been some very strange and very, very, very weird decisions, out of our government. And let me give you an idea, and I can send this to you after the show. You don't have it now. There are people in our government that some of these people have come to the conclusion that, okay, they're going to be these government networks personnel, they're going to be downloading open source that's already compromised and they don't know it. And so we need to come up with a plan for them to do something when they start using compromised software. Now, if you'll just take that statement and think about it, wait a minute, you're coming up with a plan because you know they're going to download compromised software. Well, why are these networks being allowed to just download software? Why isn't this a more controlled space? And the bottom line to what's happening is, if compromised software is introduced into any network, within just a matter of seconds, it's game over, because that software is going to immediately spread and it's going to do everything it can to basically burrow in, like an advanced persistent threat. And, you may not ever get that software out until you bring down the whole network and reformat the computers.
Now, I've heard that from one of my favorite programmers, that they refuse to do copy paste anything. They will hand key in code. Even if they find bits of code, they hand key it in, because the assessment was exactly what you said, is that you copy paste, you may be pasting in things that you have no idea that you're pasting into the code. And things can be embedded in there. And that is definitely a real threat. The knowledge out there it's not good right now. It's not good. So they're helping to build an infrastructure unknowingly a lot of times that is, as you say, spreading this virus that is helping every enemy on the planet. Our entire government right now is a crime syndicate. It works that way. And so, of course, they're going to weaponize anything.
Well, the worst news, too, that a lot of folks out there just don't get, is what I'm about to tell you. Now, what I'm about to tell you, if you go back and you look at, you'll hear about all of these successful hacks, and you will hear about disconnecting from the internet. They disconnected from the internet. Now, what's so sad about what's happening, especially with our water plants, CISA puts out bulletins back in, November, December, and the water plant issues, where they're instructing all devices facing the internet to be disconnected. People really don't understand what that means, because when you have to disconnect for any reason, that is a total failure in cybersecurity. The cybersecurity is not working, and a lot of people just don't understand that. And so the big question that begs to be answered by the American public is, how can the government be spending 2 to 3 billion a year, 2 to 3 billion a month on cybersecurity, and all of these people with their education, okay, it's getting worse. It's worse now than it ever was before. Where's this money going? And what's also really sad is that since I found this discovery, there's a lot of people angry at me for what I've discovered. Very angry.
Yeah, too bad for them. They gotta get on the right side of the world, or just get the hell out of the way and let us adults fix this thing, because whether they're angry or not, wah, too bad. Things need to be addressed, right?
Well, yes, you're right. But let me tell you something about what some of these prominent people said to me, which I looked around the room and I truly wanted to revert back to Marine paratrooper mode when he said this to me. But he was deadly serious when he said it. He said, look, we're not trying to fix the problem. We're trying to patch it. We don't want to stop the business. I mean, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? I mean, these people, there's a couple of sayings that have always really annoyed me in cybersecurity. And that was one of them. But the other one is this. I at one time I had a security clearance. I left. The reason why I got very angry at the government, when you look at my background and you look at what I was able to achieve with the White House, and the CIA managed the WMD commission, and I completely shut down the offensive operations coming at the White House and the WMD commission. And there's a couple of things, a lot of people may know this, but there's one other claim to fame that I have, that when you go back and you read the article, I told you about the third paragraph from the bottom, about the government executive. The next paragraph is those people whose jobs it is to execute offensive operations or campaigns, they don't want to use it because it'll make their jobs a lot harder.
Oh,
Then the
yeah.
last, then the last paragraph says, but on the other hand, those people whose jobs to defend networks, they want to use it. Well, I have the unfortunate, I'm the person that basically the U.S. government, they're split into two groups. There are those that offense and the defense. And what's so sad about everything, you hear about all these hackers. The hackers, this guy's brilliant here, this guy's brilliant there. What people don't know, I've been in some of those meetings, all right, back in the day. And, people were discussing what I've done with Microsoft. And you would not believe how the U.S. government stacks the deck towards those people conducting offensive operations. I mean, when these so-called brilliant hackers can get through anything, if they find out that there is a security module or something been developed, somewhere, they start whining like a stuck pig. I mean, how are we supposed to do our job if it's secure here or secure there? You wouldn't, it's really pretty much, a fraudulent scam about them being so smart because they can get through anything. There are holes in all of these things. It's there. And
it almost sounds like political operatives or special agents that are pretending that it's annoying just so that they open those things up so that they can plant stuff in there.
Well, I was, I'm not going to sit here and say that, I was privileged to everything, because I wasn't. I stayed in my lane, but even in my lane, it was absurd. And what I just told you, that was absurd. But the other thing that's so annoying when you're dealing with people with a security clearance, you'll hear of something happening that is just right out of the twilight zone. It's absurd, absolutely absurd. And you will know that there's no management whatsoever. I mean, it is absolutely a complete cluster, from the government. And then these people with the security clearances will sit there with this arrogant smirk on their face. And if I had $1 for every time I heard what I'm about to tell you, they smirk with a smile and say, there are reasons that this is happening that we can't explain. It's classified.
The reasons because they're criminals and they're part of it.
But let me just say this to you. There are things that were happening that, I mean, it wasn't intentional. I mean, it was a massive management catastrophic failure. Okay. They use their security clearances when they are actually responsible for something. They use their security clearances when, it's a catastrophic management screw up. I mean, they hide behind all of that, and they're completely and totally incompetent. It's really amazing, just how all of this is unfolded. For instance, I had the pleasure working with a company that they've been acquired. before 9/11, I did some things, but I was never an employee of an intelligence agency, but I was partnered with a company that all of the executives were senior intelligence service SIS, retired from the CIA. They were actually pretty good people, and they were an older generation. Okay, this is right before and after 9/11, and they retired from the agency, and they worked, went right back in, and but they had a term. They called what they did, and this is an older generation that's long gone. They called what they did the quiet community. That's what they were. They were the quiet community. Their culture was, if they were executing a series of missions, and there's a matrix of what they do there that's a need to know. But if anything they did, even if they succeeded in what they were trying to achieve, if it got into the public, the mission was considered an absolute failure. And now what's happened is that culture has been gone for quite some time. And there's this new culture in these intelligence agencies to where when something happens, somebody runs out and has a contact in the news media. Are you kidding me? I mean, it's just absolutely absurd. And this country, now I can tell you, because of everything that I've done and what I've achieved, if you go back and you look at the timeline when Edward Snowden defected, the CIA WikiLeaks started, the stolen NSA tools. After Snowden, there were 2 or 3 more whistleblowers. Our entire country is now obviously, dependent on IT, information technology infrastructure. That the most incredibly important core is the security. But the security,
there is none.
Well, the security is not here in the United States being developed by Americans. I mean, you'd think American citizens, it's our country. It's Microsoft. Now, Bill Gates moved 100% of Microsoft security development and their managers to Israel. McAfee, Symantec, Trend Micro, even Cisco and Juniper Networks. Okay, American corporations, all Indian engineers. And there's reasons behind that. We have the talent over here. We do have the talent, but they don't want to deal with anybody finding out, things that aren't right, and dealing with whistleblowers. And so, this is all coming from a whole different thought process. And I'm no expert in what I'm about to say, but you hear about this one world economy, but the bottom line to it is that what they're doing is they're killing innovation over here. And one of the best livings a U.S. citizen could make is being in the computer industry, designing new technology, because that paid a lot of money for many, many years. The people that are not being allowed to create, I hate to say this, and it's just disgusting, and I don't know if I'm right, but it just seems to me that politics has taken over everything. And in this country, people are more concerned about how they politically feel instead of saying we need a new technology. They're afraid that if a new technology is embraced and they don't know the political background of this person, that they could have problems. I mean, Elon Musk is from South Africa, and I think he's an American citizen now. I'm not sure, or dual citizenship. But they hate his guts he's not a Democrat, and they hate the man. They absolutely hate him. And I just think that, a lot of this has to do with politics. And to me, that's so very sad. I mean, it's just so sad. We are a republic and a democracy. And, we have certain inalienable rights in our founding fathers, the chances they took to build this country. And to just see everyone say, hey, we're trying to protect our democracy, so we're going to shut you up.
Yeah.
And they all claim they're doing it for democracy. You can't speak.
And we're not a democracy. We're a constitutional republic. And so, even the terms they're using are skewed quite a bit. So what are the things that you found that show,
Okay.
because I can bring the presentation up here.
Sure, please.
So let's go ahead and go through this a little bit and see.
Yes.
I want people to see this, because I think this is important, because we've got our visual effects here, people. So
yeah, if you could go to the next page.
I can do that.
All right. And I'm going to put on my reading. Okay. Now, my objective here, is to come up with a PowerPoint that I want people to actually, be encouraged to try to understand this. And I'm talking about non-technical people. I would like for CEOs to understand what's happening here, because my objective over all of this is to find a population group of CEOs in this country that want to take back control of their own destiny.
I think we need to go to Linux. If you really want to know the truth, we need to get out of some of these plug and play crap and actually, have a little more control.
Well, what you're looking at, all right, is this very simple flow diagram. And what it is the basic principles. You obviously, on the, far right-hand side, there's a Microsoft computer. Now, in the middle there, you'll see a firewall. And then obviously the cloud is the internet. Now, what controls the firewall is the internal network cards. You'll see NIC number 1, NIC number 2, NIC number 3. Those are network interface cards, and they're loaded in the computer. And where those network cards are all grouped together, they're called the adapter tables. And so when a firewall works, it establishes a program software bridge to the network adapter tables, and it's controlling, what that Microsoft computer can and can't do by rules. There are inbound rules and outbound rules. If you'll go to the next screen. Now, before Vista, Microsoft Windows 95, XP 2000, 2003, that operating system, it allowed, even though Windows Defender came along around 2003, if you had Windows Defender active in your computer, a firewall active computer, it would obviously work. But corporations like Symantec, McAfee, Trend Micro, they had direct access to those network adapter tables. And the bottom line to it is on something like XP or 2003 or all those listed right there. If one firewall didn't work and it missed something, and if you had a second firewall on it, it might catch it and stop it. I know plenty of people back in the day that had 3 different firewalls on their computer. And, it truly, if one missed something, the other might pick it up, because they all had direct access. It was a completely and totally different programming environment, and it worked pretty well. So if you go to the next screen. All right, now we're getting into Vista. Now, Vista, when it came out in 2006, and I think I had it in 2006, it was released released to the general public in early 2007. But what changed is the security architecture. What changed is suddenly there is a new programming interface. If you see just to the left in the middle of the Microsoft Windows computer, there's the Windows Defender programming interface. Now, all of a sudden, Symantec, McAfee, Trend Micro, etc., they have to go through the same exact programming interface. And that programming interface, well, it wheels, and gives instructions to the network adapter table. Now, I like to let the audience know that this is a simple, down and dirty to get what's happening at 40,000 feet. I'm sure there are people that will want to argue with me, but essentially, there was a totally new programming environment, and you had an interface with Microsoft that was never there before, and you had to use it. Now, if you'll go to the next screen. All right, so the programming environment is very intense, and the specs that are published, they're out there, but they're incorrect. But let me tell you what the saving grace of me being able to bring all this information to bear. There is a population group of users worldwide in Microsoft. There's 3, 4, 500 million people, using Microsoft computers, something like that. But I call the people I'm about to talk about, I call them super users. And who they are, they're people that are just hooked on their Microsoft computer. And they're not programmers, but they are the kind of people that'll sit in their underwear 24 to 48 hours playing with their computer, watching everything, going into systems. And thank goodness we have those people, because after I realized what was happening, I knew the questions to ask to search the internet. So what do I find? Now, in this year, Microsoft has a new alliance with McAfee. But back before that, I found posted websites where these users, they were obviously using a Microsoft computer, they had Windows Defender, and they downloaded McAfee. And they're looking at it and they go, wait a minute, this looks like the same thing. It's because of this programming interface. It's all essentially Microsoft. Now, here's the most interesting thing. For the readers, you can't zoom in on it, but this user says, hey, is the Windows firewall and the McAfee firewall one and the same? So the tech rep from McAfee comes back where it's highlighted in blue, and he says, well, to basically answer your question, yes. So do you see right there, how can they be one and the same? Well, that's because of the new programming environment. And so Microsoft is never off. Okay, McAfee may be sending instructions, but Microsoft is active, and they're taking care of the housekeeping. It's nothing like the programming environment on XP. So go to the next screen. Now, what this boils down to is there's an off button in Windows Defender. Go ahead and turn it off. Okay, it's not off. We even have tests to run for anybody to run. Turn it off. We can tell you what to go in and do, and you're going to see that it's active because it puts things back. Now, the bottom line to it is that there's a system service off switch, okay? And this is where the term of the intentionally designed architectural doorway. Everything I've discovered is an intentional design. And I've stated many times, and I think I stated yesterday, the people behind this are geniuses. So go ahead and go to the next screen. All right. Now, what you're looking at, no one can see this, but in my development, basically to control what these users are doing, I used about a 38, 40-year-old technique called Windows Piped Interface, where I could put what's called a wrapper and control command.com and control Windows PowerShell, control the input and the output, take total control over it. Piped interfaces have been around for some time, but the bottom line to it is to watch it. And the bottom line to it is how to completely start and stop all security, including the firewall. So go to the next screen. Now, what people think is happening, all right? This screen, the security architects, the IT users, the programmers we have, what you see is the Windows computer back on the right. It has a listing of the PC internal active processes. They believe what they've set up in the firewall is controlling all of those processes, and they're in control of all of that. And the firewall is what authorizes it before they go to the internet. That's what everybody thinks. That's the way it should be. This is what they believe is happening. Now go to the next screen. What is actually happening that people do not know, okay, is that the firewall development interface is called firewall API.dll. What the world doesn't know, and I'm going to get into this and explain everything, is that it is not the security architects, it is not what they deployed that's controlling the network. Each of those individual processes listed there, and there might be 20, 25, I don't know, they have the firewall API interlinked into it. They can get an instruction from Microsoft to override it at any time. So go to the next screen. Now it's going to get very intense, because if you remember yesterday, I said, I have to come up with a solution. I have to come up with a way to bring this to the screen so people can see what's happening. Now, if you'll look to the left, that is a free utility called the Process Explorer, which has an option where you can define a DLL and look at where it's linked at in memory. And you will see, I know the audience, I mean, they can download this. This is free for anybody to see, that some 25, 28, 30 processes, each one has the firewall API.dll interlinked into it. So each individual process can take control of the rules. They can dynamically create whatever they want, open the door, okay, through the firewall, transmit, erase the rule, close the door, and there's no log. Now go to the next screen.
The implications of this are like horrifying, because they could plant stuff on your computer, they can delete things, they can alter it.
They can create an entire forensic trail. Now I'm going to get into that, explain to you what I'm going on there. Now, when I start showing this to security architects, they go nuts. They go nuts, and you wouldn't believe all these people with their certifications, all right? They start making the wildest comments that make no sense when they're, when they become, when they believe they're in a defensive corner. Because the worst part of what's happened in this country is that you get these people that go out and they take these theoretical tests, and they actually believe their own BS, and they think that they know everything because they know the theory and know this is how it's supposed to work. And so when I show, like on the far left, all of those processes, System 32 firewall API.dll, the reason why this is in here is I've had PhDs and Microsoft certified security experts just spout off and say, well, you don't know how many versions of firewall API.dll on a computer. You know, you hear you hear crazy things, absolutely crazy things, and they think, well, you know, they may have a DLL in this folder, the same name, DLL. That's not true. But what I was forced to do, obviously, is okay. There's firewall API.dll in the system 32 on the far left. You see the pathway, all right, and you see system 32. Go to the next screen, please. There's only two in a Microsoft operating system that's installed by Microsoft. You know, who knows what people may do with this stuff. But the second one is in the syswow 64 folder in Firewall API. Then, you know, there's only two. There's the interlinks. Each one of those processes can individually, dynamically wield the security of the firewall. Now, please go to the next screen. Now, they're very simple terms that a CEO can understand, all right? And that is, you know, what's an application programming interface, an API, all right? There's a really simple explanation of what it is. What's a dynamic link library? Now, these are all terms that have been around 40 plus years, okay? You know, and what's an exported function? Well, that's, you know, a programming segment. You know, what is C, C++? And then, you know, what is the firewall API.dll? Okay, well, that's the dynamic link library that has all of the functions to wield the security of the firewall, which, you know, everybody is forced to use that interface. Now, if you could go to the next screen. Now, why is it called an architectural doorway? People want to use terms associated with the vulnerability. Now, the reason why I don't use the term vulnerability is for one specific reason. This is an intentional design, okay? People relate the term vulnerability as to some sort of computer program that has a flaw in it that's not working right, so therefore it's vulnerable. That's not what's happening here. This work is actually, in my entire career, this is the most brilliant software design mechanics, and there are no fools behind it. These people are geniuses. They're very smart. It's a very, very cool and slick design. The reason why they put so much effort into this is that throughout history, the people behind this, every back door that's ever been created has been found. Because a back door, what it is a computer program that at some point in time, maybe continuous, maybe it's on a timer, a clock timer inside the computer, but it will open a computer port and it will start listening. It waits for a connection, and when the connection's made, that back door, it circumvents and bypasses all the security in the computer. What's happening here is that these people behind this, that designed this, they know every back door has been discovered. So now I'm about to say something now, but you got to listen to the entire statement. The Microsoft security works. It works. It is actually, but Microsoft has designed brilliant mechanics to wield it at their discretion. It is absolutely brilliant. Now, the reason why it's not a back door, and what they're doing is that they're wielding the security of the firewall. They want to make sure that computer's secure, but they're getting everything, okay? They're getting it all. I mean, this company, you know, a lot of people think after all these years, all right, you know, Microsoft is really the bear in the woods, and a lot of people don't even know it. That's sad. So what is happening here now? A lot of security experts that are going to be listening to this, they're going to say, now wait a second, we've got hardware firewalls. We've got this, we've got that. We can intercept this, we can intercept that. This took a lot of thought of what these people have done. There's brilliance in these mechanics because they're perfectly aware of all of these other corporations with defense security technologies. They're perfectly aware that they're going to have to go through a gamut. They're perfectly aware that even in software updates, that the corporations may have a dedicated server just for software updates, which many of the Fortune 2500 have. They're aware of all of these facts. They know this. This is why these processes that have the firewall API designed into them, integrated, interlinked, they initiate the events from inside the network out, and every one of these processes has 100% administrative rights. In other words, they have carte blanche on the computer. And on top of that, they've already established the pathways between the source and the destination. It's all established. And when it's initiated from the inside out, it has the privileges, and inside of Zero Trust, it has the tokens. So you've got all of these companies that want to partner with Microsoft. They have to adhere to their partnership agreement. They can't interfere with the internal mechanics, number one. But number two, all of this is happening authorized. And throughout that server or that Microsoft desktop, those 100% privileges, they're passed through the network through a process called inheritance. They inherit, okay, this is allowed to do it. It goes to the next realm. Okay, it's allowed to do it. Lo and behold, it's game over. Now, we call this hidden in plain sight. Now, the reason why is the previous screens, okay, you can take a free utility from Microsoft called the Process Explorer, put the DLL name in, and you'll see where it's active through memory. It's been there all the time. The sad, terrible part of the reality of this country, nobody's looking for it.
Nobody wants to find it. They don't want to find it.
Well, but go to the next screen.
I'm a lot more cynical than you are, because I think that there's a lot of subversion behind stuff that people have bought into.
Now, this is what really annoys security architects and the people that are so angry at me. First of all, I added the slides to show the pathways that there's only two firewall API.dlls installed by Microsoft. One's in the System 32 folder. The other one's in the SysWow 64. And then they come back and they want to argue and say, well, that firewall API.dll, it really doesn't have all those capabilities. Wrong. Okay. Now keep in mind, I think I'm repeating again, everything that you're looking for and looking at in this presentation, absolutely everything. None of this is my professional opinion. None of it. This is all third-party facts. It is what it is. I mean, none of this is my opinion. This is all based on what's actually out there. But as a technologist, I'm also an MBA, and I look at this like a giant case analysis, and I pull it all together. It's all out there. Nobody's doing the research. So when it comes to what's in this firewall API, if you just go to the very bottom of the last line, it says how many functions are in this, which means each function can send an instruction to the firewall. There's 196. Are you kidding me? They can take it over. They can do anything they want. It's right there. And boy, do they get annoyed when I show them this. Now, to go to the next screen. All right. So here again, bringing what's happening to the screen. What you have on the left-hand side is a free utility Process Explorer. I take what's arguably considered the workhorse DLL of the Microsoft operating system, because many times you'll go into a computer and go into the task manager and you'll see it maybe listed maybe 20, 25, 30 times, because the operating system, the main system processes, they start several SVC hosts and pass parameters to them of what they want to execute and carry out. It's a pretty slick idea, but all I'm doing here is going to the first SVC host, okay, in this computer that has the firewall API interlinked into it, and you'll see the process ID is 940, and I bring it up into an exploded view, and basically that SVC host, okay, has the firewall API.dll, and it can run any of the 196 functions to do whatever it wants to do with the firewall. Is that amazing or what?
Yeah.
Now go to the next screen. This is going to get real intense. Go to the next. Okay, now the next screen, what I do, Google has a security partnership with Microsoft. Now, how many times in your life have you heard either the Windows Internet Explorer or the Google Internet Explorer? One's Windows is MS Edge, the other one's Chrome. How many times have you ever heard of a user on the internet using it and it being hijacked and exploited? Okay, and you know, one of the biggest areas of harm to a computer is whatever Internet Explorer they're using being hijacked because a user's done something stupid. Well, the Google Chrome Explorer has the firewall API built into it. So they're surfing the internet, okay? Whoever's behind all this, they could activate the firewall and change anything however they want, you know, and not log anything, you know, just to show you how crazy this is. It's in the Chrome Explorer. Now go to the next one, please. All right. It's in the MS Edge. Okay. The Internet Explorer. Okay. The Explorer you're using surfing the internet can take over the security of the computer you're on. Now, is this incredible?
Unbelievable.
Well, yeah. Now go to the next screen.
We've got like the keys to the kingdom to everything.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I mean, so you see, so the bottom line is the CEOs that you know, they in a lot of the security architects, and I'll get into that. But now let's start really compounding the issue. I mean, really, really bad. Okay, really bad. The fact is that there have been these major source code breaches, major, absolutely major. Okay, and you see them there in 2020, 2021. Then there was rootkits that were exploded again in 2021. Then people took undocumented functions, which are to only be used by the Microsoft, their internal programmers. Okay, they got to all, and by the way, I don't use any of that crap. Everything I've done is legal, above board. You know, I shouldn't say this. I mean, there's a saying out there now that you can sue a bologna sandwich, but everything I've done, I'm legally allowed to do under the fact that, you know, Microsoft released certain specs, you know, to avoid this monopoly lawsuit in 1999, 2000. Everything I'm doing, I'm authorized to do. So I don't use any of this undocumented mess. But even in 2024, that last line, you see, the Russians got access to their source code, and it was so bad. Whatever was going on, I don't know, you know, not enough. But if you were to look at what was written as a word problem, apparently they got in and they just couldn't, you know, they just couldn't terminate whatever they were doing. And they somehow or another were getting back in. And that's why it says it's not over, you know, so something truly catastrophic. So you had catastrophic issues from 2020, 2021, 2023, and 2024. So if you go to the next screen. All right. So if you were to open up your Windows firewall and just look at the rules, I think I'm just showing the inbound rules here. This is typical where you can see the rules being listed. Okay, so that's pretty much what it looks like, and to control all your communications and all your processes. So go to the next screen.
Just a minute.
Okay, what I work so hard on is that able to bring everything to the screen. This is the solution that I designed that instantly goes in. It grabs all of the service processes. It grabs everything that has the firewall API interlinked into it. And I establish an interface into the firewall, and I've uploaded all of the rules. And now legally, I'm in control of that part of Windows Defender, and I'm monitoring all the logs to instantly detect, report, and reverse what's happening. And you won't see anything like this from any other security vendor in the United States. This was just an incredible amount of work. Now, if you'll go to the next screen. All right. Now, you saw the previous screen of what it typically looks at, and this is obviously an extreme, but I can click one button in my solution, instantly delete 100% of the Microsoft rules, hit another button, and replace it with 100% CDS rules. And I don't think you've probably ever seen that from another security vendor in the United States. Most people.
I haven't, and we had to deal with that with the Microsoft intrusion with the two-party authentication and such. And I mean, it's really an egregious overstepping of what they should be doing. It seems to me very, very intrusive. It's spy worthy. It's control worthy. It's all of these things where they can literally take control of all of your accounting. They can take care of, or they can take control of all of your processes, and they can lock your data down. So if they wanted to, this is what we saw. If they wanted to disable a company, they've got access to do it.
All right, can I address that for a moment? Can I address that for a moment? Because in my analysis, obviously you're looking at a lot of technology. And by the way, if you don't mind me injecting this, I have a lot more information. I mean, the information I have a timeline of some 30 events to tie all this in to world events before the 2020 November election, which is.
Could you come on tomorrow again at 11 o'clock?
Yeah, I need to get you all of these files, so we need to, coordinate.
I want to keep this going because I'd like to have you come back on tomorrow at 11 and pick up right where we are and launch into this again.
Well, let me just say this last point, if I could, because I know you got to go, don't you? Show's concluding.
Yes, I need to get to my next guest, but this is like, I really wish we had about 6 hours to sit here and just hammer this thing out.
You got to keep in mind, I'm the first one to bring this to attention. It's been going on for the past 18 years. But let me leave you with this. Yesterday, and I said this to you, and I'll be very brief. I'll end this in 20 seconds. The people behind us are geniuses. They're not fools. They can't be underestimated. I've looked at all this. I've looked at all of the technical issues. I've looked at the events that unfolded. I've put on my case analysis hat. And one of the wonderful things about being a technologist, being able to design, thankfully, and create intense designs, but I know how to put together case analysis because I'm an MBA. in my opinion, my humble opinion, I said yesterday that the highly educated, and I used the term highly educated idiots behind this, do not understand the dynamics and the power of what they released, because this is just as bad for any Democrat as it is for a Republican, Libertarian, Independent. But where I'm going is this. The people behind this are moving slowly and cautiously. They're not stupid. There's still a major population group in this country of conservatives. There are still states that are somewhat conservative. Whoever's behind this really doesn't have control of the population per se, where they can get away with this carte blanche. Not yet. I mean, we may get there, And the reason why this next election is so important is because if we don't turn this country around, at one point or another, they're going to unleash the trigger on this. They're going to unleash the trigger. And the bottom line to it is, if it keeps steamrolling the way that it is, okay, when they unleash the trigger, people are not going to be able to defend themselves in court. They're just going to go away. So now, the people that are listening, I'm not a conspiracy theory person. I'm not. What I do is that I look at facts. And ma'am, with all due respect to everybody that's listening, no kidding, are the mechanics, is the technology in these computers to where they can place any forensic trail and make the user look like they did it? That is present. That is present. That is a fact. That is not conspiracy theory. That's not wishful thinking. This is really there. There's still, for instance, what they did to 45 in New York State. I'm sure they wouldn't get away with that, in a state like South Dakota or North Dakota, or maybe even Florida, because the panhandle has become much more conservative, leaning back to Republicans, and people are moving there for safety, for law enforcement. But this is something that they're wielding. And I want to say something to you that's really bold, but it's true. And this is the last thing, very last thing. When this gets known, and God help me for saying this, and it gets in the hands of lawyers, and please understand, I even kind of hate what I'm about to tell you, but all the people that have been convicted and sent to jail or prison because the evidence was obtained on their Microsoft computer, and if it was an operating system Vista or later, they have the evidence to prove that somebody else put this on their computer. Because when we're able to go further on, now you've seen what's happened. These are the facts. It's third party. Then I've got a timeline of national and world events that happened, 18 months before the presidential election. Not my opinion. It's all out there. Okay. It's going to astound you. And then I can go through that. And eventually what I like to do is, that timeline's intense. I'll send that to you so you can publish it. Then I did a timeline after the 2020 election until about May. And what I want to tell all the users, or the listeners, or if you think what happened in the 2020 election was a fiasco, the 2020 election is nothing compared. When you see what's happening, it's nothing compared to what we're going to contend with in November 2024. And that's not an exaggeration. They are real. Pardon me?
Well, I think that this is something that we really have to explore, because this is a full-on attack on American soil.
I just hope, here's my problem. I just hope that, and I'm talking about the entire United States. I did this. I said yesterday, I took an oath to defend this country against all enemies, foreign and domestic. The road that we're traveling down on this, even if there are, the people behind this, they're wielding power that can be instantly turned on them at any time. People don't understand. This is not good for America, period, because let's just
it's an act of war. This is an active attack. It's an active war on American soil, on America in general as a group, but also every single American out there is under a threat of attack right now.
Well, the last thing I can tell you is this: is that look at history. Okay, people are going to say, "Oh, wait, it's extreme," but look at Nazi Germany. Look at Mussolini. Yeah, but look at Stalin. Look at every communist socialist country. What happened? There was a population group of people that supported that, but as the economy dwindled down or as things progressed in that country, what happened? Those people that supported putting that government in place, they came under fire. The government started coming after them. These people in the United States, that's why I call them highly educated idiots, they're not thinking this through. This is something that is absolutely a violation of everyone's rights. And it's bad.
It's a threat. It is a clear and present danger. It's a threat. So, well, I'm going to say thank you so much for coming on today, stuff. And then tomorrow, I will plan on you being on at 11 o'clock tomorrow. And I'm just going to keep the cameras rolling tomorrow for as long as it takes, because I have
So what I'd like to do, if we could, I'll send you an upload. Can I send it via email or?
Yeah, do the same way you did. Yeah, that's fine. And then we'll talk about it tomorrow. Thank you so much for coming on here today. I'm going to go ahead and my next guest is Courtney Turner. You are absolutely fabulous, Bob, and I appreciate you, you sharing this information.
And I'm coming from you from the dungeon. This is everything behind me. I even use chalkboard whiteboards. I get an idea, I got to scribble it down. So
that's fantastic. All right.
If you saw what was behind me, I'd have to kill you. So
that's funny. All right. Well, we'll see you. We'll see you tomorrow at 11. Thank you so much. And I'm going to go for a short break, and then Courtney Turner will be on.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Good morning and welcome to the second hour of Brandenburg News Network. I am Donna Brandenburg, and it is the 4th day of June 2024. And he got a welcome a girl on here. How you doing, Courtney?
Good. How are you?
Good. I missed you.
I know. I miss you too.
You got to tell us what was going on over there in Switzerland.
Pardon?
You got to tell us what was going on over there in Switzerland. What was going on?
Oh, the WHO.
Yeah, you were in Geneva, weren't you?
Yeah.
So, well, give us an update. What was going on there?
So it was they were trying to pass through their pandemic agreements. They had originally called it a treaty. They changed it to agreement because the agreement doesn't have to be ratified. And they unfortunately did pass the IHR, which are the amendments, but we were there protesting it, and I was invited to be part of it. It was called Inspire Global Leadership Summit. So it's kind of like a think tank to create a strategy of like parallel systems in medicine, really worldwide. So it was like people from all over the world, from all different backgrounds came together, try and find out ways that we could come up with different systems for healthcare versus sick care, and ways that we can bridge the gap between fighting the system, and by fighting, I just mean exiting, but also, creating new strategies and solutions. So it was a 2-day event. The second day was the rally and that was very heartwarming. I mean, people really all over the world were protesting and really rejecting what the WHO is doing and saying, no, we want to be out of the WHO. We do not agree with these treaties. We do not comply. So that was great to see, and that was open to anybody. That was kind of a public event. The day before was a summit, and that was a closed event. So
well, if we had an actual president instead of Biden, the puppet sitting in the seat, like
Yep.
let's just say the rightful president of the United States, President
Right.
Donald J. Trump, I'm pretty extra sure this nonsense would end, because we have to have, that's why our elections are so important too. I mean, President Trump has got to win that election, because the rest of these yahoos, and I mean the Republican and the Democrat Party, all of them,
Oh, yeah.
nobody's doing anything. I mean, and who's fighting the hardest against President Trump? Well, classically, it's been the establishment Republicans. So I've got a lot of hope for Laura Trump being in there. So we'll see how that goes. I'm supposed to meet with her next week, actually.
Okay.
So that should be really interesting.
I'm going to be in Michigan next weekend. So yeah, for the Reawaken.
So will I. So it'll be really fun to catch up a little bit.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure I'm going to go to the Reawaken, the whole thing, but I'll be around on at least part of it to say hi to people and my friends and such.
Great.
So I've got another reason to be there, which is going to be really fun. So
okay.
Yes,
I want to hear about that.
some of my research buddies, I'll call them research buddies,
Okay.
are going to be there. So that's going to be a lot of fun. Old friends, old research friends who never pop their heads up. So that'll be real fun.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, that'll be great. Well, I look forward to seeing you in person.
Yeah. That'll be fun, because it's been a while since Lindell's event. So
yeah, I know.
Yeah. And I'm going to qualify what you said by fighting, because you know what's going to happen. Somebody out there is going to go off into stupid land and say, oh, they're talking about fighting. It's like, all right, we're not saying grab your torches and pitchforks, okay?
Yeah, no. And really, this wasn't even about so much, the rally people were protesting the WHO. And that was it was, your typical kind of, it was a long march. They did do speeches, but really what we were doing with the summit had very little to do with the WHO. It was really more about, we need an alternative. I think a lot of times when people talk about parallel systems, they don't leave you with anything. It's more of, okay, well, so we're going here and we leave here, but you have to, I think there needs to be some sort of bridge. You have to recognize that is the main system right now. They do have the power, and so it's got to be both simultaneously. So really, we weren't so much it's more, you guys can do your thing, you like it, you want to support that, you go do that. We want to find
we're
another
not going to participate anymore.
Exactly.
There's going to be a point in time where the funds get cut off, and your lifeline to having power is going to be done. So,
so when you talk about elections, that is something Trump was really adamant about, was that we should defund the WHO, we should exit. And I absolutely agree with that. That is one thing. The United States is one of the number one funders of the WHO. So that it would be huge if we were to pull up funding out. So
UN, Red Cross, NATO, all of these nonsense things that are involved in human trafficking, drug trafficking, weapons trafficking. I'll say CPS, largest human trafficker on the planet, and the nonsense going on at the border and people are turning their backs on this. So I had Jason Jones on yesterday. And we were talking about the open borders. This is our country that has institutionalized organized crime, and it's bad. And they're doing it on a global stage here, because we're talking a global crime syndicate. And any one of these people in office that's not speaking out of it, they're guilty. So I went in and I looked at, Jason was talking about the things that are actually happening with the cartels, because they post videos bragging about what they've done. and it's all just horrific torture and such. So I found one yesterday, as is pretty well accepted that Hillary and Huma Abedin did, is cutting the face off of that 10-year-old girl and raping her. I don't know if you've seen it, but I've seen enough of it to know what's going on. I mean, it's pretty horrific.
Yeah.
And so yesterday I thought, well, I'm going to look into some of the sources that Jason said, and sure enough, they're all out there, cutting hearts out and faces off and a whole 10 yards. I've seen other people that have been dismembered, and it's there. It's all there. And it's not, you don't have to look at the dark web to find it. It's on X. It's on, wherever people have social media. And I did post a link on my Telegram channel and on X. I did not include a direct video because I didn't want to shock some people. Some people will not be able to stomach this. And I had a satanic ritual that I put out, or that I have, and I've shown that to people several times that want to see, but I won't put it online because if somebody goes in there and they're not prepared for it, it is not something you will ever unsee again. You're not going to unsee. You're not going to unsee it once you see it, and it will fundamentally change you. Not everybody's got the mindset or the heart to look at that and say, this is a problem that's going to have to be faced. And I get some people are caregivers, some people are warriors. Guess which side of the line I'm on? I'm a get on that little white pony, get the, start leveling things a little bit more. I'm more of that mindset, because you have to deal with these problems. You can't walk away and turn your back on it and expect them to go away. They haven't yet. And, they're not going to go away until we actually get some people with some guts to face them and say, we're done with this. It ends right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the UN, I mean, a lot of people know the number 2 task of the UN, this is the exoteric, it's not like a hidden thing, is to track the dark markets, the black markets. So they have records of all of these trafficking, both, human as well as drug.
I didn't know they had actual records of it.
They have records.
Can we tap into that?
Yeah. I don't know where on the site it is. I don't know where it is, but it's on there. I mean, that's like, they publicly say that's their job, is to track dark markets.
Of course, because people can't be trusted. So let's give it to the Marxists so that they can track all of us, just like Microsoft.
Well, I think it's more because that's what they're in the business of. So they claim that, so their exoteric message is that they're tracking these dark black markets, so we can have records of it. But I think it's because that's their business. So of course they track it.
Yeah, they're going to go in there and they're going to make their trades and their deals on the black market. It's funny. I had somebody that actually came on one of my properties and they pitched a tent, and I was more than a little pissed. I'm going to tell you right now, cut down some trees and decided they were just going to form their little Antifa camp right on my property. So of course I decided to just go big or go home, and ran in there and cut the tent apart and went in and pretty much I called the cops and I said, you guys can stand here or whatever you want to do, but we've got it posted as no trespassing. I literally went in there and grabbed their stuff. They had logs of retail fraud that they had committed.
Wow.
And the cops are like, well, do you want to give them a day to get off? And I'm like, hell no. I'm like, we're going to throw all this crap in the back of the pickup and we're going straight to the dump. Except I kept the records that they had in hand in case they ever come back again. So I've got all the evidence of what they did, and basically said, they come back here again and they're probably not going to walk out.
Wow. What did the cops do? Did the cops do anything?
The cops said to me, the cops were like, you need to run for governor because we need to have somebody with some guts in there. I'm like, if they're breaking the law and there's a clear and present threat, they don't just get to move into your house or on your property. The loser class of people that think they're entitled to do nothing but have an opinion, but have never done anything to earn it, or they're just parasites. They're these people that are just pitch a tent and want to sit there. Oh, we're going to be free of everything. Well, no, you're not free of everything. You're just a parasite that's eating off of everybody else. Go get a job, do something useful.
Right.
And, you don't just get to move into somebody's house. You don't get to move in our nation. You don't get to take our tax dollars. You get to go home. You don't go. You don't collect $200. You go directly to jail and on that C-130, straight back to where you came from. If you committed a crime or convicted of crimes, which may end it all right there.
I agree. I couldn't agree more. I was just curious what the cops did because my friend Jeremy Boring, he was telling the story on my podcast about how
they asked me to run for governor.
Right, you're like, been there. Yeah. Was this before or after?
I'm already kind of in the game here, guys.
Yeah. I was gonna say, was this before or after? That's funny.
Yeah, it's funny.
It was in California, and he had like this routine guy who kept coming, like basically just living off of his property. And then I guess like the final straw was he kept peeing in his pool. And he called the cops, and the cops were like, well, he's basically, that's his home now, so we can't really do anything. And I don't think they said that, but that was the gist, And that's when he was like, okay, we've got to move out of here because the cops wouldn't do anything.
No, and so and the cops are kind of clueless, really, when it comes to. I had to call. I had a tenant that got real abusive. So she's like, I'm calling the cops. I'm like, hold my beer. I've got them on speed dial. So I called the cops and met them over there. And she's like, well, why did you call the cops? I said, you threatened me. And there's going to be action that's not going to go in a good direction. So they sat there being their little, I don't know, moron, idiot selves. The cops finally looked at them and said, you've got a real nice landlord here that really wants to make things better. And the cops said to me, they're like, why didn't you evict him? I said, you clearly don't understand how the system works.
Right.
And, so it's a little more complex than that, but it still takes people that are willing to stand, and they got it pretty well figured out that you don't abuse people, because they were doing things that, it's real funny as a landlord. I've gotten to see, I own quite a bit of property, and I've gotten to see how people live. I could write volumes on how people actually live. And I might do that. I won't put names attached to it, but how abusive people are. I have one guy, and I really like this guy a lot. I really very much liked him. And he brought in a roommate, and this roommate was completely psycho, off the wall, and was abusive to him, very abusive. And he had a cat, and he would do things like grab the guy's keys, throw him in his truck, hoping somebody would steal his car. He tossed the cat outside one point in time, hoping that the cat would be killed or run away. I mean, people are able to do terrible. The worst one I have was, I had this tenant that came in, and it's a funny story. I can't tell all of it online until I like prepare people, because it gets really crazy. But this woman was so lazy and miserable that she would actually go to the bathroom and defecate in a towel and throw it out the window. Too lazy to get to the bathroom.
Oh my gosh.
And her roommates were really professional and very nice people. And I'm like going, I tell you what, I'm like, this is what the legal process is, but there's a few other things that you can do to discourage her behavior and encourage her to leave. And I'm like, that would be the method that I would do, because, this woman was a clear and present danger. She was absolutely deranged, and she was a threat. She was a clear and present threat to everyone that was on the property, but they don't care. When people want to be really, say, oh, we got to feel sorry for them. Honey, put them in your house. If you want to feel sorry for somebody like that, and see how many minutes you're willing to take the abuse that these people are used to. And that's the whole problem with like the illegal alien, bullshit that's going on. And they're like, oh, now that we're going to pay you $500 to put one of these people in your homes. How many people have literally opened their homes up, like ignorant, naive saps and have these people turn right around and kill them in their own homes. We're not talking the best of the best here, guys. We're talking people who have no intention of being a good person. They are parasites. They victimize other people, and their mindset isn't the same as yours and mine. And unless you've seen it firsthand, I could sit there and talk until I'm blue in the face. People are like, oh, you don't understand. We just have to be kind to them. Honey,
Right.
snake's a snake. That snake is eventually going to bite you, and you cannot change their MO. God can. God can, absolutely. But it is highly unlikely the way that people are going after that, because they think, well, if I'm just good enough, they'll learn from my behavior to be a better person. No, they won't. You're not big enough to change them. They don't want to change. They know what they're doing is wrong, and they're doing it anyway.
Yeah, sure.
Pedophiles, they're not going to change.
Right.
You're not going to change a pedophile.
Right. Yeah.
So,
I don't think I have it with me, but I've been reading, speaking of pedophiles, I've been reading, they go by David Temple, but it's really a consortium of, that's just like a pen name. It's Ken Wilber, Mark Gaffney, and Zach Stein. It's called Cosmoerotic Humanism. But people like, so since I've been going through this, kind of the theosophical roots of the UN, and I've been kind of uncovering that, a lot of people have really come out after me. I guess I'm attacking their religion. Yeah. But what I was really surprised by is the people who are defending Mark Gaffney. And I'm like, he's like an alleged pedophile, literally. And when there's a whole episode of him on Dr. Phil. And I'm like, this is not my assessment. Like, you guys can go watch and make the judgment for yourself. But his justification, like, he thought the vindication for the allegations was that she was 13 going on 30. Somehow I'm like, that's just what a pedo would say. Like,
I had talked to somebody, and I'm very, very, I was shocked. This was years ago. A 50-year-old who basically had sex. I'm going to say raped, but his justification was she was consensual. A 12-year-old niece. And his justification was, well, she was already sexually active. I'm 50. I don't have any diseases, and to his niece. And so I knew she wouldn't get hurt. And I was like, this is the justification. This is how these people think.
right.
And a normal person cannot even come to terms with what a person that is an uncle says about his 12-year-old niece and justifies this and thinks that this is okay. And then you have stupid people around them saying, well, we just have to have understanding. And I'm like, understanding. I can't and I won't have understanding to this.
No.
This is beyond understanding. This is.
I don't really want to understand that. Like, there are many things I have an open mind about. But that's not really one of the things I like want to understand, to be honest.
It's like, I was like, I was absolutely. Now, there's nothing that you could say that's going to make me feel okay about this.
Yeah. Well, so what is
So
Theosophical Society? Yeah, it started in 1875. Madame Blavatsky is the most well-known. I think there were actually 19 founders. One of them, the other one was Henry Alcott. He was actually a British intelligence asset. And it does look like that's when you start digging, turning over, all the stones with these theosophical groups and the neo-theosophical cults. It does seem like there are a lot of intelligence ties behind it. I personally am very concerned about some of the ties that I'm seeing in the medical freedom movement.
They're a cult. The ties are a cult.
They are a cult.
That's where it goes back
to. But I'm just saying that there are a lot of military ties and to these occult groups, and that's very concerning because that's kind of how operations go into effect and take hold. And I did a really great episode with Matthew Crawford on this. I think it was almost 3 hours long. And he actually grew up in Edgar Casey cult. So they were grooming him for things like remote viewing, and his brother was being groomed to be essentially a con man, but a magician and kind of a cult leader.
Matthew Crawford. Give me. I'm not familiar with him. Who is that?
He has a Substack called Rounding the Earth, and he um I think by like his profession, his background is a statistician. So he got kind of into this world through COVID. They had approached him to analyze a lot of the data, and he had some very groundbreaking analysis of the data. And he started diving down the rabbit hole because they weren't using his data. People like Malone and Kirsch were commenting on how valuable his insights were, and yet they didn't really do anything with the data that he brought forth. He thought that was very curious, and so he started doing some really deep investigation. He's absolutely brilliant, really brilliant. But the combination of his own personal experience, having grown up in a neo-theosophical cult and having been, firsthand groomed for some of these things, like the, psychic type of things they were working on. Really, remote viewing was the predominant one they were grooming him to do. So he really experienced firsthand. So he had a different kind of perspective when he started doing this research, and because he's published some math textbooks, he had some time and some funds to be able to devote to this type of research. And really, I think just his curiosity drove him to go very, very deep.
So it's Arcadelia. Is that what it is? Is it called Arcadelia?
The what?
His Substack?
No, it's called Rounding the Earth.
Rounding the Earth. Okay, let me see.
It's Matthew with one T. So I've been doing several, but he really, but just because of his research and his personal experience, that was a really fascinating interview. Yeah. But it does look like, so one of the things, one of the reasons I brought him up though, was he coined this term. I wish I had, I'd love to take credit for it. I think it's so apt. But he calls it the mobs. He says it's not, it's not the MIC. He actually thinks that's a psyop, but yes, this is him. He says it's military occult banking syndicate. And I think that that's very accurate. I think that's a really great way to describe, what they typically call the military industrial complex. He actually thinks that the military industrial complex label is kind of a psyop, and I would agree with him. I don't know that I'd be quite as harsh on that, but definitely I think it is military occult banking syndicate. And what it is, and that's why I say my concerns when you start looking at the military and intelligence ties to some of these theosophical and neo-theosophical cults. And throughout history, it seems very apparent that they all do seem to, maybe I shouldn't say all, but, you start finding these intelligence connections. And I think that that's really important for people to understand, because there's a reason that these intelligence organizations are tied to these groups, because that's how they can infiltrate. That's how they can have a strong hold on some of the operations, psychological operations that they're pushing. And I think with the medical freedom, it's kind of a Hegelian dialectic, because you're now targeting a group that typically would be a little bit more liberty minded, typically more personal freedom, medical freedom, independent sovereignty type of a mindset. And not to say necessarily left right, because I actually think the medical freedom movement was a way to get people who wouldn't necessarily have been on the right to now be quote unquote labeled as the dissident alternative right. And a lot of them came out themselves saying like, hey, like, the anti-vaxxers traditionally were on the left. So like this whole labeling doesn't fit us. But it's a way to be able to now put this, the nominalistic approach onto them. And I think it's been very effective, because now they're seeping. And when you start looking at some of these figures, a lot of them are tied to theosophical roots. And there's a, in some of the theosophists talk about how with medicine, people like Deepak Chopra went on Oprah talking about how you can think yourself healthy, essentially. You can think yourself ill. Now, I will just say this is one of those things where they marry truths to lies. And I certainly think there's a great book by Bessel van der Kolk. It's called The Body Keeps the Score. It's all about how we store trauma in our fascia and our bodies. And I absolutely think our mindset is powerful. I do think that, we absolutely, our emotional state can absolutely affect our physiological state.
Oh,
But there's
yeah.
there's a big leap, right? So they take that element of truth and that kernel of, that we can fact check against our reality, and they then morph it into this idea of magical thinking. Like, oh, well, I could just, I can just heal you by, wishing it, or I can just, heal myself by just wishing it not so, or wishing ill, or whatever the case may be. But that basically I think it into reality. And I think that that's that's a leap. I don't think that that's accurate. And I think that it's actually kind of pernicious, because it's leading us into it taking that element of truth and something that, most people can agree upon, and enticing people into this worldview. And I just, the worldview, I think the whole goal of it is, if you look at the theosophical roots of the UN, I mean, it is Lucis Trust. And now people will make the argument that Lucis Trust, they say they're a consultancy of the UN. People make the argument that the UN has, hundreds of organizations that are connected to it. But from the inception, I mean, if you just look at even Alice Bailey's, work, and her notes from what she recalled being her ascendant master, she talks about how her ascendant master, Dwal Kul, came to her when she was in, it was actually when she was in church as a little girl. She was she was raised Orthodox Christian, and this ascended master came to her and told her that, she could accomplish so much in life if she wasn't constrained by this very rigid, religion and culture. And he told her that her mission, that she would execute in her life, would be to fulfill the goals of the Masons, which was to have a one world religion. And she herself became a Mason. It's very interesting. A lot of these theosophists were Masons, which is not typically, Masons don't accept women. They're members of things like the Order of the Eastern Star. There are other kind of ancillary women's groups, but typically Masons don't accept women. However, Madame Blavatsky, Annie Besant, and Alice Bailey, and I there might be others that I'm not familiar with, but those three were considered co-Freemason. And Alice Bailey married Foster Bailey, who was a 33rd degree Freemason. And if you look at what she's done, it does look like she created Lucifer Publishing in 1922, which a year later became Lucis Trust. It was a little too on the nose for people. I guess they weren't thrilled with the name Lucifer Publishing, so she changed it. And, along that, there's things like the Triangles, Arcane School, World Goodwill. I've done several shows on going through all of these things. And recently they just had World Invocation Day. So it looks like in World Invocation Day was all about, summoning what looks to me kind of like the Antichrist, but they call him the Christ. This is the, the world teacher, the ascended master Christ. It's not Jesus Christ. They're very clear on that. So I know people will, some people will argue with me with how I've portrayed this, but I'm reading from their works. I can read you. I've got it in front of me. Actually, I can go through quotes where they literally say that their God is Satan, Lucifer. Madame Blavatsky says this all the time, that they welcome all religions because they consider it to be a perennialist philosophy, but that it is diametrically opposed to Christianity. And they say that, Lucifer, Satan, is the real God, that he is the enlightened one, the one that will illuminate them. It's a very Gnostic worldview. But all this to say that when you look at the body of works that she's done through her quote unquote ascended master, Dwal Kul, there are 24 of them, and that you go right to the Lucis Trust website, which they say is a consultancy to the UN, and they have links to the UN. It's all about ushering in the age of Aquaria. They have excerpts from her book, Externalization of the Hierarchy, which lays out the 9-step plan for the New World Order that she came up with. And it looks like that's exactly what they're pushing through. Really, those 9 steps lay it all out. And it's right there on their website. And they even have links to things like the Aquarian Age community, which is a link on the UN website, actually. So I just point these things out to say, for those who question, well, how much power do they have? How much influence is this really, when, there's so many other groups that work with the UN? But who was one of their secretary generals, right? One of their secretary generals was Robert Mueller, and he was secretary general for 38 years. He is very known for coming up with what is called the World Core Curriculum, although in this country, in the United States, it's better known as Common Core, or as Charlotte Iserbeat likes to say, Communist Core, which I think is very accurate. But he came up with the World Core Curriculum. He wrote this book, The 2000 Ideas, which actually ended up being 7,000. And he says all of his influence came straight from Alice Bailey. And this idea that he was very involved in the Parliament of World Religions, that started in 1893 at the Chicago World's Fair. And then they did a revival of it in 1993. And they actually proposed that the New Thought should be a religion, a world religion. And New Thought leaders are people like the World Evolutionary Leaders. And some of those figures are people like Barbara Marx Hubbard, Deepak Chopra, Bruce Lipman, Marianne Williamson. They're very well-known figures who have been really popularized in the media. People like Oprah have been having them on her show for years, decades.
Oprah, the child trafficker. She stood there with John of God and all that sort of thing.
Yeah. Well,
I had a lot of questions, a lot of questions.
Yeah, well, she also really popularized this idea of Christ consciousness. And the reason I keep bringing this up to people is I always say I believe in freedom of consciousness. So, it's not for me to tell people what to believe, what worldview to subscribe to, what philosophies to use as your operating system, what religions, you should believe. But I really want to retain the freedom to do that. And I also want people, who are strong in their faith not to be deceived. That's, and I do think that it is very deceptive. When you use terms like Christ consciousness, a lot of Christians think, oh, like they're speaking to us. And Oprah was doing this for years, but this is straight out of Madame Blavatsky, Rudolf Steiner. People argue that, Rudolf Steiner wasn't a theosophist because he split. And this is true. He did split from the Theosophical Society. He started the Anthroposophical Society, but it's just another flavor of a cult. And as I like to say, if you've got chocolate, strawberry, vanilla ice cream, they're all still ice cream. So I don't know. I mean, I understand there are nuanced differences and there are things that they disagreed upon. However, it is still a variation of occultism, and it does have theosophical roots. But they talk about Christ consciousness, and when they're talking about this, they call it a panentheistic religion. So it's this idea that God is within each of us, not the idea that God created the earth and that we are in his image. And that's a very big distinction. And again, I'm not telling people what to believe, but I think it's important for people to understand there's a big difference between the two. A lot of these people subscribe to what I call Gaia religion. And this is where they worship Mother Earth. And this is where we get all the climate religion fanatics, and where we get things like Robert Mueller basically advised for things like planetary politics. Now, when you start looking at people like, I was talking about the cosmoerotic humanism, this is Mark Gaffney, Zach Stein, and Kenneth Wilber, but really they were disciples of Barbara Marx Hubbard. You start getting into what I call universe religion. So H.G. Wells terms the coin Homo Universalis. And all 4 of them talk about how we're now going to go from Homo sapiens to Homo Universalis. And so it's really now they worship the universe, whatever that means to them. I'm not quite sure how this all works. It is a little, and I don't say this to be pejorative, but it does sound a little kooky. It's very, they couch it in a very academic framework. And I'm not, and this is not to undermine them, because I think it would be a mistake. It would be foolish to, mistake these people as being unintelligent. I happen to think they're actually brilliant, but their ideas are so far removed from reality, because they do subscribe to this. It's really reflection in the old Greek sense, whereas the abstract, kind of an a priori, it's gnosis. That's really what they're discussing. And so it's not rooted in reality. It's not rooted in things that are material. And I think we have this weird kind of dualistic kind of framework where you have these two extremes: the people who are hyper materialistic and everything is about the earthly and the consumerism and the tangible, and then you have the empirical means of achieving ascertaining knowledge, and then you have the other extreme where it's all abstract and it's all gnosis and it's all mystical. And I'm a big proponent of maybe the some of the Enlightenment figures who were maybe like the Scottish Enlightenment, the common sense realism, where they acknowledge that there is a spiritual element, that there is a God, and that we can't know everything, and that there is, I would use the word intuition. I don't think they use that, but there are those elements that are more spiritual, but that there's also, as humans, we live here in the three-dimensional world on Earth, and there's a lot that we can ascertain via tangible empirical knowledge, some common sense, if you will. And I think I'd like to get back to merging kind of these two, because I think that that's our strongest asset as human beings, being in the 3D realm. But they do seem really intent on keeping us split in these two extremes. And I think it's because those two extremes are not reality, and they can craft their own narratives. And that's the other thing they keep talking about, is we need a new story. And this was fascinating because I went to see CERN when I was in Switzerland, and it's really a temple. I mean, it felt like a demonic temple. And I don't know that I would have seen it quite this way if I hadn't just read the Cosmoerotic Humanism book. It's a 153-page book, by the way. And I think they picked that number very intentionally because of the breakdown. One, when you add the numbers 1 through 17, it makes 153. And a lot of pages are pretty empty. So I don't know, but that's just they tend to take numerology pretty seriously. So I suspect that that's why. But because I just read that, and they kept talking about how we need a new story of the universe, and all through CERN, that's what they talk about. They talk about it's 14 billion years old or something, and we have this perception, but we need to craft a new story of the universe and understand how we fit into the universe. And that's exactly what they say. And I think I see this a lot with I've talked about ARC, Lines for Responsible Citizenship, and they talk about this too. We need a new story. And what does Klaus Schwab say? We need the great narrative. It's kind of like Lyotard's meta narrative. And that's really right. I think because they know how persuasive story is, and it's couched. CERN is all couched in being quote unquote science. But when you really look at it, there's very little science. There's like a kernel to anchor to and to give something to lend credibility. But most of it's narrative. And that was such a fascinating thing to kind of click, for me to
Belief
to-
system.
It is.
It is a belief system, is
It's
what
a
it is.
worldview. Yeah,
Yes.
but it's a narrative, but it's interesting how transparent they are about this, because, and I didn't put that together until because I kept hearing them say we need a story. I'm like, that's exactly what the cosmoerotic humanists were saying, that we need a story about the universe. So, but it's no longer about the planet. It's no longer a story about the humans. It's about the universe, that story. And, it really, I think that's their evolution. You look at things like Politics 3 by Abraham Maslow, which is where a lot of this comes from, right? Even the theosophical religions, a lot of them are based on this humanist religion. And it is a religion. Secular humanism was actually declared in 1963 by the Supreme Court to be a religion. And so the Aspen Institute used to be the Aspen Institute of Humanism. I don't remember if it was secular humanism or they just said humanism, but they actually took that part off the name because of the Supreme Court ruling. So it is a religion, and Politics 3 was released. It was Abraham Maslow's work that he didn't finish before he passed, and it was put together by the Stanford Research Institute around the same time that they were doing the Changing Images of Man document. I think it's very interesting, and it was also done by Willis Harman, same guy. So they released it around 1970, Changing Images of Man. They did the first edition in 1972, then they did the final one in 1984, and then they published the Aquarian Conspiracy book. This is Marilyn Ferguson, and Marilyn Ferguson is the name of Willis Harman's secretary, and so I think it's a code name, but the whole purpose of it was to popularize the ideas that were in the Changing Images of Man. But I digress. The whole point of that was that Politics 3 was all about holistic politics. It was basically planetary politics. And it was based on Upsychian values. So he talked about like a Upsychian network of people. This was something that Barbara Marx Hubbard really ran with. She used to say that networking gave her such a elated feeling that it was better than sex. And so, but the Psychian network is Upsychian means the literal translation is like of having or aspiring to a higher mind or soul. So it's all about this noosphere, right? And they talk about how these people who a lot of times when people read Maslow, they think is a very individualistic, at least this is kind of the writings I've seen. People tend to perceive it as being a very individualistic path, the hierarchy of needs, although he never actually used a pyramid. That's just how the textbooks portray it. But he talked about the hierarchy of needs, and the top of that, the pinnacle, of course, was the self-actualization. But really where he was going with all of this was being values. And it was all about the people who had become, quote unquote, self-actualized would essentially be the philosopher kings. And that they would create this Upsychian network of people who would then, essentially rule over everyone else. And
they knew best.
Yep.
And the rest of us were too stupid to understand.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they didn't have the capacity. And so then through this, you would create this planetary rule, and we'd have peace on Earth. So I will just say this too. I don't think everybody who subscribes to all of these things, although they're not my beliefs, and I think there's a lot of pernicious aspects of this belief system. I don't believe that everybody involved is inherently what you would think of to be evil. I don't think that they're all bad faith actors. I think a lot of people genuinely think that this is the best path, that they're doing good. And this was something I really saw over the past weekend when I was in Geneva, and we were talking about the WHO, and we're talking about the inceptions of the WHO and the new way forward. There are a lot of people who are in these organizations, whether it be the WHO or the UN, and they feel like they kind of got a bait and switch. They went in, they're good, decent people who went in thinking that, they'd be able to help people, help humanity, save the world, if you will, very kind of idealistic type people. And on the inside, they've realized that that's not what what they're getting is not what they signed up for. And they're actually very upset. And I really hope that we can have some of them come forth as whistleblowers. I think that could be a big hope for some change for the future. So,
well, it's just like within our own government, how many people have run thinking that they're going to make big changes, and then they show up and they tell them how it's going to be. Right. And then the threats and the coercion start and that sort of thing. Yeah. And it's a very unusual person that can listen to that kind of narrative and tell them to shove it and do what they want, what needs to be done regardless, instead of the go along to get along mentality. Because honestly, we have been programmed for that, you're gonna make somebody mad. Oh no. And they may never talk to you again. Oh no. All of this stuff. You might be ostracized. You may not be allowed to be here or have a job or all of this. If you don't go along to get along, you're not going to be in the club. Well, I don't know about you, but that's kind of a club that I don't want to be in. It's like, why would you compromise? Why would a person compromise they're what they know to be right,
Right.
just to stand in the group with these people.
Well,
And if they threaten you, then the first thing you should do is get so loud that they can't silence you.
right.
You know,
Well,
shout
I
right in
don't have it in front of me, but in this Politics 3 document, I think one of the most horrifying aspects of it was he was talking about using T groups in for politics. So this is essentially sensitivity training, which by their own admission is brainwashing. So the National Training Labs, which is Kurt Lewin, Kurt Lewin was a Frankfurt School refugee. He then went to work for Tavistock as the director of Tavistock. And he started the National Training Labs, which is a partnership with the National Education Association. Part of why
which
ours,
should
yeah,
be abolished.
completely. No
Like
argument from me there.
MEA needs to be completely defunded and
Oh
abolished
yeah,
unless people come forward as whistleblowers. They're
yeah, I
complicit.
agree.
They are complicit in grooming and honestly kidnapping our children. I mean, when
Yeah.
you have an
Well, they
organization,
work very closely with Child Protective Services,
yes,
and
they
yeah,
do. Well, it's like
and they, to traffic. Yeah,
we have
I have a lot of whistleblowers who have said that. So I'm not making an accusation. That's I have whistleblowers and personal victims who have made that claim. So
absolutely. Well, we've got a school over here where they basically are giving the teachers, the school board was trying to accomplish giving the teachers the ability to counsel and help them accomplish abortions in high school. And people are like talking about different ways to address this. And I've said, this is kidnapping.
of course,
Go for kidnapping. Don't go for removal, resolution, any of this. Charge them with kidnapping.
yeah,
Because
absolutely.
whether because they're taking physical custody of a parent's child.
Yeah,
It seems simple to me. Anybody that does something like that, charge their sorry behinds with kidnapping. Go big.
right. Well, I brought up the sensitivity training, the National Training Lab, because you were saying that in these organizations, like if they ostracize you or they chastise you for not going along with the group, well, they want to take it a step further, and they actually do these sensitivity training brainwashing tactics. So this is pervasive all through corporate America. That was part of the mission of Tavistock and the National Training Lab. Kurt Lewin was also funded by the ONI, the Office of Naval Intelligence, to help, with the creating groups and conflict resolution, this sort of thing, really sensitivity training in the military. But it's interesting because there was a document, it's a CIA document. You can go to their website. It's a declassified CIA document. And they talk about how they'd really like to see the effectiveness of sensitivity training. But in order to do that, they would have to conduct some sort of a study. And they didn't use these terms. They did say that it was too reminiscent of the Chinese brainwashing tactics. And I think that they didn't say this, but I think they were referencing the Maoist struggle sessions. And they said, however, so we can't do it because as much as we'd like to see how effective this really is, we don't want to harm the military. So, but Maslow talks about using this in politics and how effective it would be to have these groups. So if you're familiar with things like EST, Esalen, the EST started, there was these offshoots of all of these EST reminiscent groups, like Landmark Forum is one of the really famous ones that a lot of people know. And in it, they do these, it's all about the win-win. So, and this is what people like Bruce Lipton were talking about with their, where they talk about like the evolutionary consciousness. Barbara Marx Hubbard has a whole foundation that was funded by the Rockefeller for conscious evolution. And he uses this analogy of how, like, we started off as the amoeba, and then we go to multicellular organisms, and then we go to humans who are so intelligent because we're a complex multicellular organism. But he says that what gives us intelligence, is the membrane. And he said, because that's where information comes through. But he says now we are at a crossroads, and this is what the evolutionary leaders believe. We're at a crossroads. We have, the potential to go completely extinct or to evolve, the next stage of evolution. And this is the concept that Barbara Marx Hubbard talks about with, co-creating. And this is, again, very Gnostic, right? We're co-creating with God. And to the next stage of evolution, which for them is to become this super organism of humanity. They say this is not, in inference. This is not kind of conjecture. They are very clear on this. And they say that the membrane of this super organism of humanity is going to be the internet. What does that sound like? It sounds like the AI world society, right? The global brain. They do talk about a global brain. They talk about the global hyborg mind, which Barbara Marx Hubbard has the Heart Math Institution. They talk about global coherence. So they'll use technology to lull us into a state of global coherence. But this idea of using the sensitivity training, they say, we have to have win-win. And part of what these evolutionary leaders are saying is that they reject Darwinian evolution. Though they talk about this other type of evolution, but I think it's really neo-Darwinian. They take the aspects they like, they reject the aspects they don't like. But they say the problem with Darwinian evolution is this idea of natural selection is too competitive. It fosters individuality. And, the idea of competition is what they reject. Then we need cooperation. And so when you look at some of these groups like Landmark and the sensitivity training tactic, they talk about that, how everything has to be win-win. You can't have somebody win and somebody lose, which I'm not saying I want people to lose or suffer, but it's kind of a reality of life, right?
Well, it's a great motivator. Like if we take all the pain out, it helps people become mediocre or lazy or do nothing with. There's no competition. If you have something to shoot for and you see somebody and go, wow, I want to do, you're gonna fail on your way. It's like a little kid learning to walk, but you're going to learn to walk eventually if you keep persevering. Or anything, anybody that does a skill that's good at it, like your aerial shows and such, you don't just walk in there and all of a sudden be able to fly through the air with the greatest of ease, right? Yeah, you're going to fall a few times. Or same thing with riding horses. I have had to tell so many.
That's the first thing they teach you when you ride horses. I remember my first week of horseback riding. The whole week I wasn't allowed to ride. I had to fall for a week.
You got to get things figured out because you get. And I was telling somebody that like last weekend, horseback riding is more to do with your seat. Right. And a new rider, they do it every time. It drives me nuts. It's always like this with the reins because they're trying to catch themselves. Right. It's like plant those hands in one spot and leave them alone. Don't, because you want to make a horse. My hair is just totally weird today. I got to figure out.
Mine is too.
I'm looking at the camera backwards, so I'm trying to figure out how to sweep it.
I know. You don't know which side it is. I do that too.
Yeah, I'm like, okay, which way do I go? But anyhow, you plant yourself. And once you get that seat where you've got a 3-point contact between your feet, your thighs, and your rear end, it takes a while to learn that. You're not going to get it in a year. You're not probably going to get it in 2 years. But once you get that seat, it takes practice. Right. You're gonna have problems with it for a while because it's muscle development, it's muscle memory, and it takes practice. You're not going to get. That's why I think horses are such a great trainer, because you're forced to put the time in to the relationship with a horse, your actual skills, and you never master it. Right. So, like if you're 90 years old and you're a horse person, if you're honest, you're going to say, "Yeah, I spent a lot of time on horses." But no one ever masters it. You're in a continual learning cycle because you're dealing with an irrational creature, which is a horse.
Right.
And you get that practice though. You're going to literally, if that horse jumps, and I've had him do this jump and flip around 180 degrees because a chipmunk looked at him from a tree. You're not going to move because you've got that seat. You're immovable. Right. And your balance is there. But when people don't put the time in to learn and fall and perfect what they're doing, you're never going to be good at it. You've got to be okay with failing and not being perfect. Yeah. And so those lessons we learn in our fails teach us more than we will ever learn with our successes. So you got to embrace them. Thanks God that I failed at this, because guess what? I'm not going to do that again. We're not going to be repeating that. And then forgive yourself and go on. Get right back on what you were doing. Jump back on that horse or whatever you're doing, relationships. It doesn't matter what it is. And say, well, that was a great lesson I needed to learn. And I'm not doing that again.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, I mean, so when people say like, why are you, diving down this rabbit hole and why are you attacking these people's belief system? I have no problem with people believing whatever they want to believe, but I think it is really dangerous when they're uh, a belief system is impinging upon our freedom of consciousness and really what it means to be human. They talk about human 2.0, and I think human 1.0 is very flawed, but I kind of like us with all our foibles. It's that element of humanity that I don't want to see eroded, and
I
that's my
believe I believe that we're in a spiritual war right now, and that you can see the difference between somebody, and we've talked about this a lot. Somebody who's human and just is kind of like fumbling around like a little kid. They're making some bad choices, but they're really kind of lost and such. Which was our commission, was to find the lost lambs and help them, not condemn them, but help people, help and serve, right? But they're kind of human beings, kind of fumble around, and we need to help prop each other up a little bit and say, come on, you're having a problem with that, how about we sit here together and we work on this together and not abandon each other in our journey as we're moving around.
Right.
But then you have those people that have fallen in straight up with Satanism, and they know what they're doing. They are harming other people and trying to destroy what the life that God gave us, and just make them little automatons just to move around like their little trucks they're psychopaths that they just use people. They're not there to help. They want them to serve them. They want to be God.
They want a neo-feudal system, a technocratic neo-feudal system.
They want to be God.
Yes.
And they're trying to
Well,
play
some
God.
of them believe that they are. I mean, that's
absolutely.
When you talk about, theosophy, it means the divine wisdom. They believe through the divine work that
they're special, aren't they? Yeah, they have been imparted this wonderful knowledge from the universe. And so now all of a sudden in their own minds, that's like true mental illness right there. They are God. And what they say, they know, but and unfortunately, I'm going to say it, and this is going to be unpopular, but you see that out there just in everyday life where people are so set on that. I know what's right. I know what's right. And they will go absolutely stupid berserk defending their position instead of looking for truth. I would rather look for truth and defend my position. And if somebody comes forward with something I didn't know, that's when you sit back and go, well, instead of, get the gloves on in a political event because we're right and we're going to win. It's like, none of us know everything. Only because that's God is God, and we ain't it. We're not it. And it's kind of interesting. Well, I tell you, where else do you want to go from here? Is there anything else you want to talk about? It's almost 11:30.
Oh yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah. No. Sorry. I rambled on.
Well, it's like I wanted to let Bob go through his stuff because he was showing how this information hacked by Microsoft, and I can tell everybody where this is going. This is going to go straight to Serbia and straight to hacking our elections through programming. And so he's going to be on tomorrow at 11. And I think this is the most important issue of our time. Because if we actually have a voice, even though we're like a little bumbling bunch of little kids, but we're brothers and sisters of God. That's what we're supposed to be, helping each other through this. Not what we think they should know, but what God is allowing them to go through to find him. You can't make somebody. You cannot. It's like horses. Yeah, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. It's true. People are the same way, but you can help them, and you can help them in their humanity and let God lead them. Stop trying to be God. Let God be God. Get out of his way, and things are going to actually work much better. But we're gonna continue to go down this, because I really think that if people actually have a choice in our elections, things have a way of evening out, because God will be talking to people, and all of a sudden people start following him, and then we start evening out. These extremes kind of move away from each other, and then you get to the, and I'm not talking being center of a political narrative. That's bullshit. Okay. Yeah. The whole thing is just crafted, but understanding the difference between good and evil. This is a battle of good and evil. And what's going to happen with this is as people work through this, the evil is going to disappear. All we got to do is shine a light to it. And it's not averaging out good and evil. That's not what I'm talking about. And I know there's going to be somebody out there that's going to go stupid on me. Listen to me long enough and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. And don't use the headlines. No, it's like truly, it's like you, but people have to sometimes, it's like a little kid, test those boundaries on an individual basis. Testing those boundaries and finding, oh, yep, the stove is hot. Not going to do that again. Yeah, let's see. Or this person, that if they use drugs, yep, bad plan. I just, but he's giving us that choice to figure it out. He's not forcing anyone. Right. Everyone has their free will to either walk directly into hell or heaven. The choice is yours on which way you're going to go, and you're responsible. You're going to ultimately be responsible for the choices that you make. And I'm sorry, but I it would be great if we could save everybody. That's not what God put in place. Mm-hmm. God put in place, you have free will.
Yes.
And what are you going to do with it? Right. So like when I see those people that are doing stuff in the cartels and such, and like I said, I posted this on my Telegram channel, which is at Brandenburg for MI and X. I posted the link, so it's not like in your face, because I tried posting the link and it was like, you have this guy having his face cut off, which I'm like, yeah, it's a little bit brutal right there, but we're going to put it out there. If you want to see it, you can see what they're doing, what they're bragging about, what they have allowed to come into the United States, operative in every state. It's in all 50 states. This is the fault of the Republicans, the Democrats, of Joe Biden administration, of the CIA, the FBI, the deep state, the whole damn thing. It is their fault. But that is not representative of we the people.
Right.
We just have taken control of this and all the mechanisms, and now it's up to us to say, ain't happening. And I don't care if I live or die at this point, because I do know where I'm going. Mm-hmm. I will fight this with my very last breath, and that's a good thing. So I think one of the things that I think is important is that when you see stuff like this, you don't necessarily have to take it into your soul and say, oh no, whatever shall I do? Well, you're going to fight it is what you're going to do.
Right.
This is not us. This is them. So I posted, you've seen me put on Soak Stream before. There's many different, they've got a lot of things. I want to play this a minute, because I do think that there's a point in time where we have to get ourselves, our brains set on straight, because when you start seeing this crap, you're going to have to be able to put this into perspective.
Right.
This is just the way it is. It's going to come out. And when it comes up, how are you going to deal with this? Well, one of the best ways is go into the Bible and listen to what God's saying. He's talking to you, and listen to what he has to say. So let's play this for just a minute.
The Lord surrounds his people from this time forth and forevermore. 1 Samuel 25:6. And thus you shall greet him. Peace be to you, and peace be to your house, and peace be to all that you have.
And I'm going to stop that right there, because that's how we should be talking to each other. Peace be to you. Peace be to your house. Peace be to all those whom you love. Mm-hmm. Instead of coming right out like a screaming banshee, you want to have our way.
Right.
It's like it's all about. I mean, you want to see the crazies. We got crazies on the right and the left. Got to have it our way.
Oh yeah, definitely crazy on the right and left.
Peace be
But
to
what was that
you.
song? Crazy to the right, jokers, clowns to the right, jokers to the left. Here I am stuck in the middle.
Yeah, there you go. And but we're here as healers in order to bring together, to bring peace to all situations. Now that doesn't mean you have somebody that's cutting off the face of another human being or dismembering them, that we're peaceful at that moment in time. There's a difference between clear and present threat that has to be eliminated. And I mean eliminated, or somebody who's just fumbling around. If there's somebody that's out there to hurt people, we got a whole different thing. But let's end in prayer here today, and we'll see you next Tuesday. And for certain, great, it's going to be a great day. But dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for Courtney and for Bob and for all the brave people that have decided to come forward and fight for your good purposes. We stand for you, family, and this nation. Everything that you've given us a wonderful place to live. And what screwed it up? We did. We've screwed it up right from the beginning with the original sin. And we are sorry. We don't want to do that anymore. We want to follow you. We want to learn from you. We want to be like you, but we know that we aren't you. And we're thankful for that. I wouldn't want your job. I really wouldn't want your job at all. It looks like a really tough job. And there's parts of it that I just want to hide underneath, your protection, your protection in your arms, and knowing that you are fully able to keep away everything that's evil from us. And so as your children, we run to you for your protection. We are willing to follow you. Show us what we need to do and follow alongside of you. And we ask that we want you to be in charge of this nation, our lives, our everything around us, because you're good all the time, and we're just not good all the time. We make mistakes. We don't have all the answers. We don't have your perspective and your vantage point of seeing things from the top, from behind, from below, from every single angle, but to see it in truth and in righteousness and in goodness. And we are very thankful that you have not abandoned us, nor will you ever abandon us. Please let everyone go today in peace. The people that they love, peace to them. Their homes, that your peace and your favor would be upon all, and that we could learn to live together in helping each other out and letting you work out the details. We love you so very much, and we're thankful for everything you've done for us. You're a great friend to us, and we want to be a friend also to you, also as your children. In the name of Jesus Christ, we pray. Amen. So thank you so much for coming on today. And we will see you next week. So this is where we do it, guys. Go to brandenburgforgovernor.com, because I'm the best non-conceder who's ever not conceded in the history of the United States of America. And we're going to just keep punching forward, punching through this until we get things righted. And that's the goal. So with that said, God bless you. God bless all those whom you love, and God bless America. Make it a great day. It's a choice. Be tough. Be that example if you don't have one. If you don't have a good example, guess what? Be one, because the world needs you. The world needs you to step up and have your voice heard and to say the things that are important to you. Don't be quiet. Stand up, get loud, and be that person that isn't afraid to go against the grain, because nothing's ever changed by people that go along to get along. Have a great day, and we will see you tomorrow. We're going to have on Liberty Essentials. We have on Dan Cummings again after that, talking about the Constitution, as well as Bob Terry's going to be back on. And I'm going to leave that camera run as long as we need to get all of this information on how Microsoft is involved in rigging our elections. Have a great day.